When the light fades and the moon rises over Innistrad, humanity becomes the universal prey. Packs of werewolves are drawn out by the moon, their humanity washed away by animal rage. Vampire families bare their fangs at the scent of human blood. Hordes of walking dead lurch across the manors and moors, driven by an innate hunger for the living. Alchemically created abominations twitch to life in alchemists' laboratories. Geists haunt the huddled human towns and terrify travelers along the dark crossways in between. From Innistrad's depths, powerful demons and impish devils plot humanity's downfall. Hey there, and welcome back to Deep in the House of Lore. Considering it's finally October and I am well into my personal spooky season, we're moving from the calamitous seasons of Bloomburrow to the harrowing darkness of Innistrad. If you like what you hear, consider subscribing to the channel and following along. I love lore, and I'd love to have your company in the study. In addition to normal lore videos like this one, I also do Lore for Rest, a toned down narration, perfect for relaxation, focusing on studies, or even sleep. Now it's time to begin. Inspired by Gothic fiction set within the 18th, 19th-ish centuries, Innistrad takes much from the Germanic and Eastern European styles of folklore and landscape. Do keep that in mind as we move forward. The plain is dark and full of terrors. A desperate plain full of desperate people. Innistrad has suffered greatly over the millennia of its existence within the blind eternity's vastness. One foe after another ravages its populace, from vampires and werewolves to demons and Eldrazi. There is little respite to be found. A moon of silver rules the land, bringing forth Innistrad's season as its faces change. The new moon is the equivalent of spring, a terribly short season with longer days and more, albeit muted, sunlight. Those born under the sign of the new moon are considered more holy than others, holding greater potential. Heralding autumn is the harvest moon, where a massive orange-red moon dominates the sky. The days grow shorter and colder, and bonfires become the primary source of protection and light from vampires as farmers toil their fields beyond dusk. The final season of the plain is at the hunter's moon, symbolizing winter. Hunters must venture further beyond the bounds of safety, the cold and dark perpetual, as they explore further into the wilds dominated by werewolves. Despite its seemingly desolate nature, Innistrad does have major cities within its 4 provinces of Gavani, Kessig, Stensia, and Nephalia. You'll have to offer me a little scholarly indulgence if I mispronounce any of the words. Read and not heard, you know how it goes. Gavani is the stronghold of humanity, with its principal city of Thraben at its center. The Cathedral of Avacyn stands within its borders, formerly home to the mighty Archangel herself. Given the number of dead in such a large city, Thraben unfortunately suffers more undead than other areas, a point of particular interest, especially when Liliana comes around. But history lessons are for another time, and right now we're laying the framework of the plain. Kessig contains the vast wilds of Innistrad, shrouded in an eternal autumn. Werewolves make their homes here, often prowling the night when the moon is high. Despite this, some humans still create small villages within the wood in hopes of finding their own sustenance or even making coin off their ventures. Vampires claim the province of Stensia, its mountains and forests always cloaked in fog, its sunlight never quite penetrating the haze. The manors of great vampire families dot this harsh landscape, but don't misunderstand. The legacies of the Markovs, Falconraths, Stromkirks, and Voldaren are spread across the entirety of Innistrad, each of them carving their own bloody path through the plain. Nestled at the edge of the ocean, Nephalia contains many port towns utilizing the river that cuts up through Innistrad. All sorts of riffraff stop in port towns, and those of Nephalia are no different. Geists and vampires are not unfamiliar there, and those who come to the edge of the water tend to have their own secret agendas. Even though the topic will have its own video soon, we must touch on the Church of Avacyn and its effect on the plane. Created by Sorin Markov in hopes of curbing the dangers of Innistrad, the Archangel Avacyn brought balance to the realm, protecting humanity and ultimately giving them something to believe in. Every single thing on Innistrad carries her mark. Blessed weapons, the coin they spend, the churches they seek refuge in. Avacyn was the name on every praying lip, called to in the night, in the dark. While her light has faded, her legacy and influence are undeniable and ultimately changed the plane of Innistrad forever. Edgar Markov was an alchemist facing a terrible time. Famine was sweeping the plain of Innistrad, hunger ravaging its way through the belly of every nearby city. Desperate and ever seeking further, more intense measures, his ear was finally bent by Shilgengar, a demon who promised that the answer to not only satiating his hunger, but also to eternal life, was drinking the blood of an angel. Ever the studious and zealous scientist, Edgar enlisted the help of his sons and, in a blasphemous act, only slight pun intended, exsanguinated the angel Marich. From her blood a strange elixir was brewed, and in one scathing moment of truth, Edgar Markov drank. From this singular act rose an entirely new world of vampires. With his newfound zeal for life and blood intact, Edgar began doling out this sanguinary marvel to his heirs. Upon administering, forcefully, I might add, the brew to his grandson Sorin, he inadvertently ignited a latent spark within him, flaring to life that of a planeswalker's powers. Sorin was yanked from his mortal existence on Innistrad and into the other planes of the Blind Eternities, all while undergoing a terrible transformation into the vampire we all know today. Despite the shocking revelation behind Sorin Markov's transformation, Edgar continued to dispense the tainted blood, transforming those of the likes of Olivia Voldaren and Runo Stromkirk, as well as the progenitor of the Falconrath line, which, to my knowledge, we're still unsure who that might be. If you happen to have that knowledge, please share it with me in the comments. I'd like to interject here. Facts, of course, are the meat of any study, but I often find their spousing to leave little room for conjecture or inner thoughts on them. I personally find it fascinating that despite being the alchemical progenitor on Innistrad, Edgar Markov did not invent vampires in the overarching realm of Magic the Gathering. They exist on a vast number of planes that do not include his meddling. Anyway, let's continue. This act eased one famine and eventually created another. Certainly, fewer people relied on normal food for sustenance, but a greater number of beings now relied on blood. And, well, those creatures fed on the starving citizens, ushering in a terrible cycle. The plane, for all its other problems, became an even more cruel and inhospitable place. Soren did not stay gone from Innistrad, however, and eventually returned to his home plane to find it overrun, vampires wreaking havoc, werewolves terrorizing the wilds of Kessig, demons prowling, and the entire ecosystem completely out of balance. His plan to save the plane was twofold: create a prison for grave offenders and to create a protector. The Hell Vault, a monolith meant to imprison unusually powerful supernatural creatures, was crafted from a sliver of the silver moon that hung above, thanks to the knowledge he had gained from another planeswalker, Nahiri, on his ventures. In the same night that he created the Hell Vault, he would create their savior, the Archangel Avacyn, birthed from his desperate desire. In addition to channeling the plane's beliefs about its silver moon and life after death, Soren used his own soul and a mastery over mana, a huge reservoir of power considering he was a pre-mending, godlike planeswalker. Avacyn rose and battled the tide of darkness that had threatened to swallow Innistrad. It is a cruel symmetry that our salvation was born of the Markov family. S. Markov, a creature so ancient and powerful that he survives even today. Seeing that our destruction and theirs were inexorably linked, Soren created Avacyn, a force to rally our remaining angels, a force that we could unite under, a force constructed to hold in check the very vampires who created her, says the Lunarch's journal. Avacyn did indeed bring the chaos of Innistrad under heel, giving humans of the plane a rallying being, someone to worship, to pray to. Before long, the face of Innistrad had changed, every single thing bearing the mark of the Archangel that brought them salvation. Unfortunately, all things must end and all cycles must continue. Despite his every good intention, Soren was marked as a traitor against his kind for the creation of Avacyn, and the story of the Markovs only gets worse from here. Innistrad was not immune to outer beings, a few of the most notorious creatures in all of Magic the Gathering at some point making their presence known. The Markovs at various points had their hands full, dealing with planeswalkers such as Nahiri, who felt slighted by Soren in her efforts against the Eldrazi, and after a tussle was sent into the Hell Vault. Liliana, who came to the plane to fight an imprisoned Griselbrand. Griselbrand himself, a demon who approached the Hell Vault and Avacyn to incite combat. Emrakul, the Keening Mother, and Phyrexians. Yes, there is a lot happening on Innistrad. The history of vampires and the plane of Innistrad is one that spans millennia. So long, in fact, that numerous events all pile atop one another, so many things happening simultaneously or while one piece of the puzzle is in use elsewhere. Soren, as we know it, is at least 7,000 years old, making his progenitor even more ancient. Since this study is specifically dedicated to the Markovs and the progenesis of vampires, we'll have to leave some of the finer details to another venture. Let's bring the focus in on Griselbrand. A demon most powerful, Griselbrand and his hordes ravaged Innistrad before being brought down by Avacyn. The demon challenged Avacyn to direct combat, a battle that waged for days before the Archangel summoned her last bit of strength and forced the demon into the Hell Vault with his underlings. In his last act of defiance, Griselbrand impaled Avacyn with a spear, her spell whipped up around them, imprisoning both the demon and Archangel within. Soren Markov's carefully crafted guardianship was gone. In time, the planeswalker Liliana would visit Innistrad, searching specifically for Griselbrand. He had created a pact that would enslave her soul, and she understandably did not like that. In opening the Hell Vault, Liliana not only unleashed the demons held within, but also Avacyn, and the long task of restoring balance began once again. With the Hell Vault open, the previously imprisoned Nahiri made her way back to her home plane of Zendikar, which had been ravaged by the Eldrazi in the 1,000 years of her captivity. Devastated by the losses she saw, Nahiri swore vengeance against Sorin Markov for his flippant lack of action and vowed to make Innistrad suffer the same terrible fate as Zendikar. She returned in full force, attacking Markov Manor and torturing the vampires within, encasing them in stone. Using many monuments to channel the natural energy of the ley lines in Innistrad, Nahiri called to Emrakul, the Eldrazi Titan, summoning the mighty beast to the plane. These monuments, called cryptoliths, caused those created purely by mana to go mad, which, after being assaulted by a spell, included Avacyn. The radiant savior now believed her devotees to be corrupted, and thus the reign of terror began anew on Innistrad, with archangels attacking the very humans they vowed to protect. Away planeswalking, Sorin Markov returned to see the hell enacted upon his home plane. Realizing this would be an uphill battle, Sorin entreated the other vampire families to assist in fighting the multiple threats tearing through their land. A part of the Legacy's cruel deal? To destroy Avacyn once and for all. Painfully, Sorin agreed to do so. He encountered Avacyn at her cathedral, having cornered the planeswalkers Jace and Tamiyo, her madness bearing down upon them. He tried to speak to her casually, even offering to let her kill the planeswalkers before moving to the cellar together. Despite the deal he had struck, he hoped to cleanse Avacyn of her affliction. Avacyn, in a moment of clarity, blamed Sorin himself for making her easily influenceable and thus corruptible. He was at fault for everything. This guy cannot catch a break. The two fought mercilessly, and Sorin eventually drained his archangel of blood before desperately pleading with her, begging to make her anew without such flaws. Ever proud, Avacyn declared, "If I am not the daughter you want, then we must battle again and again forever. For I will never yield. I am no monster's instrument. I will not be altered by the likes of you." And rather than plainly describe the moment to you, I'd like to pull another quote directly from her story, I Am Avacyn. "I cannot see his face now, because he turns away from me. I cannot see whether he is monster or man. I can only see the point of that sword. I can only hear ancient words, words of a ritual performed in reverse, words of a gift being revoked. I can only feel my knees dropping onto the unyielding limit of the cathedral floor. I can only smell the ash of some nearby smoldering. I can only touch the shadow on the floor under me, the shape that marks my first moment. I can only say to you, in this my final prayer to the world, that I only ever meant to keep the innocent from harm. I am Avacyn. I am to protect." After an entire millennia of hope and protection, Sorin Markov destroyed his creation, the magnum opus of his long life, and Innistrad was entirely vulnerable. And then Emrakul came. Heralded by Nahiri herself, the Eldrazi Titan devastated the land. Sorin encountered Nahiri in Markov Manor, still a cruel taunt of vampires encased in the very stone of the building, and the two fought. Eventually, Sorin too was trapped in stone, while Nahiri escaped the plane entirely. Conscious in his prison, Sorin was forced to watch as Emrakul moved across his beloved Innistrad, an act made worse by Olivia Valdarin, who found Sorin in this vulnerable state. Laughing and jeering at him, Olivia declared herself the new lord over Innistrad, stealing Sorin's fabled sword as she did so. Now, you may be asking yourself, where is Edgar Markov during all of this? Being ancient and tired of the realm, Edgar would often retreat to his coffin deep within Markov Manor and induce sleep until the age of the world felt new again. This passivity might seem callous against the world he wrought, full of vampires, but he felt no particular loyalty to the people or their plights, unlike his grandson. Sorin would often visit his grandfather despite their estrangement over the millennia, garnering advice or leaving books regarding the current world state. After the events that found Sorin imprisoned in stone, Edgar's coffin was stolen by Olivia Valdarin, who arranged a marriage between herself and the vampire progenitor. In a charmed stupor, Edgar agreed. Now, this phrasing might make it seem like a short length of time, but remember that vampire lives are long and varied, and none of this happens particularly quickly. In between these events, Sorin Markov frees himself of his stone prison, carving, chewing possibly, his way out. He sets off for Ravnica, spurred by the call of the interplanar beacon, its message fueled by the multiversal threat Nicol Bolas. Some people insist Nicol Bolas. Again, we've talked about before. A little scholarly grace would be nice. Realizing that Nahiri has also been summoned, he wastes no time in reigniting their feud, savagely battling his former friend over the terrible fate of his plane. Only in a moment of absolute desolation did they temporarily call a truce, fighting against the Elder Dragon in hopes of pushing back the ravaging tide. It was after this that Sorin returned to Innistrad, finally taking in the immense grief of all that had transpired. He had tried to save the people of his home, only to be met with disdain and being forced to destroy his most cherished creation, only to be betrayed in the end. In his absence, Emrakul had been imprisoned within the silver moon hanging in the sky, which caused the day and night cycles to fluctuate and a strange magical frost to spread across the land. While werewolves ravaged the darkened plain, citizens feared an event known as the Eternal Night, a perpetual night in which there was no escape. Crops failed in their fields in the waning sun, and once again Innistrad was desolate and desperate. Without a focal point of belief, the citizens turned to ancient rites of the land, seeking the Dawnheart Coven and a ritual to disrupt the encroaching night. Of course, Olivia Valdarin interrupted this ritual and stole the Moon Silver Key, an item of utmost importance to the success of this ritual, and fled. The Eternal Night was officially upon them. Sorin was tired. So tired of the misery and pain and how desperately he had tried to save Innistrad from itself. While others rallied to save the plane from this impending doom, he was for once apathetic and uncooperative. Eventually, he was spurred to action by Arlen Cord and the Gatewatch to assist in reclaiming the Moon Silver Key. Now, we have several different events converging on the timeline. Olivia Voldaren wants to use the key to take over angelic flights, having imprisoned Sigarda, who rallied any remaining angels after previous events. Olivia would gain immense political power, too, by charming and marrying Edgar Markov, thus being able to overtake Innistrad herself. While she machinated all of this, the plane fell further into despair. Vampires were requiring daily blood tithes from humans on threat of death, and werewolves overran the cities, while everything else about the plane crumbled into ruin. We can tie everything back together in the events of Crimson Vow. Sorin and the Gatewatch planned to crash the wedding and steal the key, not to mention save his grandfather and the entire plane from a terrible fate. Only one of these people had an actual invitation to the wedding, however, forcing Sorin to enter alone. He was led to Edgar's chambers and was forced to watch as Olivia stirred his grandfather back to life with her blood. Edgar Markov was enraptured. Sorin screamed warnings at him, none of them heeded, as he was dragged away, his other family members joyful at the awakening of their blood-blessed Edgar. During the exchange of vows, Sorin attacked Olivia while a cacophony of sounds erupted. The Dawnheart Coven brought forth their leader's spirit, which was held within the key, and that spirit freed the trapped Sigarda, who exploded with holy power, tearing the room apart. The wedding was thoroughly crashed. While Olivia fled, Sorin confronted his grandfather, who had fled into the Voldaren Manor's Sanguitorium, a secured location for additional blood stores should humans become scarce. As they fought, Edgar expressed his disappointment in his grandson's wasted potential, while Sorin accused Edgar of pure callousness while damning his entire family to the eternity of vampirism. Falling into terrible flashbacks, Sorin was unmoored and later awakened in a pit of blood, his grandfather sneering from above. Letting his apathy once again get the best of him, Sorin sank further and further into the pit of despair. Not sorry for the reference. Reflecting on his grandfather's words and the legacy that Sorin had tried to create with the life he had been given, eventually snapping out of his stupor, Sorin imbibed the blood surrounding him, healing his wounds and spurring him to rise. Meanwhile, Edgar rushed back toward the ballroom, attacking a planeswalker named Teferi, who had come to assist Arlen and the Gatewatch. Before long, he was once again met by Sorin, who wielded a massive greatsword against him. It was a quick fight. Defeated and downtrodden, Edgar Markov was at the mercy of his grandson. Rather than killing his progenitor, Sorin ordered him to leave. Edgar hurried away, chased by Arlen Cord and her packmate Tovalar. He found Olivia, who dropped the Moonsilver Key in defeat, and they escaped the scene together through the stained glass broken by Sigarda. The events of Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow kind of mush together here. The story of Midnight Hunt claims that Sorin was in possession of the key beforehand, and only after sulking and being berated and fighting Sigarda did Arlen and company claim the key from him, thus allowing the Dawnheart Coven to initiate the ritual, which was eventually foiled by Olivia Voldaren, which would lead to the forces working together in Crimson Vow, which seems odd, in my opinion. Perhaps in his justifiable brooding, Sorin came back to his senses. Either way, the moon silver key was eventually united with the sun gold lock, and the sun shone once again on Innistrad, the eternal night's sorcery broken. After the events of Crimson Vow, Sorin would continue to work with Arlen Cord and other planeswalkers, particularly when the Phyrexian threat loomed over several of the planes. As for Edgar and Olivia, their current whereabouts seem to be unknown. And there you have it. A history spanning thousands of years, all sourced from a single desperate man who changed the destiny of an entire plane with his actions. Talk about a butterfly effect, one on an insane scale. I've mentioned before that Innistrad is one of my favorite planes, and I absolutely love the history of it all. In addition to the internal world of Innistrad, characters from the plane also affected the outside world in interesting ways. Sorin was the first printed Magic the Gathering Planeswalker card to introduce emblems, which, if you've ever played with the mechanic, can be a lot of fun if you are the controller of the emblem, or super nasty to your table mates if not. If you're in Magic the Gathering history buff, you know that the technical first quote unquote emblem was retroactively printed to be Elspeth, Knight Errant, but still, Sorin did do it first once. Edgar Markov is currently the number 2 commander in all of the decks listed on EDHREC, dethroning Atraxa for the spot, while he has yet to catch up to the Ur-Dragon, who's still nearly 2,000 decks ahead of him. One of the best story flavor cards ever printed, in my opinion, is Shilgengar, Sire of Famine, who of course kicked off this entire thing by tempting Edgar into stealing the blood of an angel to begin with. His card has you making blood tokens by sacrificing creatures. And if you sacrifice an angel, well, you get a lot more of them. Should you sacrifice enough blood tokens, you can turn around and bring creatures back from the dead as vampires. Story perfection, people. I love it. Shilgengar only got printed in Modern Horizons 3, which makes it surprising that such a storied player in the realm took so long to get an official print. In Kessig, the werewolves outnumber the priests. Werewolves, those transient creatures whose lives hinge on the waxing and waning of the moon. A mechanic introduced in the Innistrad set, the concept of day and night-bound creatures isn't exactly a popular archetype with the player base. The original creature types were lycanthrope and human wolf, neither particularly useful, and both quickly negated by the Grand Creature Type update back in 2007. Refined by the release of Midnight Hunt, the mechanic of constantly swapping your creatures gained a new lease on life, and the creatures of the night found the spotlight once again. Though these creatures exist on other Magic the Gathering planes, today we will be discussing those who roam the wilds of Kessig in Innistrad. Those who suffer from lycanthropy on the plane of Innistrad are not always afflicted by the bite of another. Rather, some are cursed, and this curse lies dormant until they hear a great howl emanating from deep within the woods of the Ulvenwald. This howl beckons them to hunt, activating the malady in their blood, and from their first hunt on, they are dual creatures of day and night. The transformation process is harrowing for the lycanthrope and incredibly disturbing to any witnesses. The eyes change first, the whites darkening and the irises filling with color. The claws go next. The hands elongate, knife-like claws extend from the fingertips, and the thumb forms a claw back near the wrist. The muzzle thrusts forward out of the human skull, and the teeth jut through the gums in sharp points. Bones crack as they rearrange. Marrow spills into the bloodstream as ribs and skull fracture and telescope. Thick, wiry fur pushes through the skin, often pushing out normal human hair. The tailbone elongates and becomes a shaggy wolf's tail. Metabolism speeds up, increasing blood flow, oxygen flow, and glandular production, creating cravings for protein and fat. Any clothing that was worn at the time of the change is generally torn to shreds and falls away. If a werewolf dies in beast form, it changes back to human form, a process called death reversion. The hamlets and villages that dotted Kessig beyond the Ulvenwald woods are ones perpetually leery of the supernatural surrounding them. Avabrook, once a thriving town, was overrun by werewolves, most of its citizens killed. Many of them, such as the mayor of Avabrook, were revealed to be werewolves themselves, despite the majority of them still being run off by the Mondronen pack. A mysterious ritual was performed on the site, leveling the town from its central cathedral. After this, Averbrook was called Hollowhenge, and today it is only home to the terrible wraiths and spirits left by its vicious destruction. The citizens of Kessig are a superstitious lot, often rallying against those they might suspect of lycanthropy. At one point, after the disappearance of Avacyn, citizens were instructed to always wear a silver amulet if traveling after dark. Those who do carry the curse often live in fear, desperately trying to keep their normal human lives while suffering their transformations in secret. Others are more brash, reveling in their power, creatures such as Tovalar, who refuse to live hushed lives and seek to bring werewolf kind into powerful howl packs. There are several of these packs throughout Kessig and Innistrad. The aforementioned Mondronen Howl Pack, originally led by the powerful and cruel Tovalar, was a fearsome group numbering around 60 that terrorized the most rural spaces in Kessig. Tovalar was unrepentant in his use of violence, and during the times that Avacyn the Archangel was imprisoned within the Hell Vault, seized every opportunity to move in on nearby cities and wreak havoc. This pack was disbanded after Avacyn's return, being driven out of the cities and hunted down by all manner of angels. The Krallen Horde. Led by a powerful werewolf named Ulrich, the Krallen Horde boasts the largest number of werewolves in a pack, totaling anywhere from 50 to 200, depending on season and circumstance. Ulrich is undiscerning in who is allowed to join his ranks, hosting all manner of werewolves from across Innistrad. The Leerog. Transforming under the dark of the new moon rather than a full one, the pack members of the Leerog were fierce and violent creatures, attacking human children in particular. They went so far as to attack orphanages to obtain such protected fodder. This Howl Pack did not survive the eventual return of Avacyn. The Vilden. This pack of werewolves has an especially cruel barrier of entry. You must have killed someone before becoming a werewolf. Murder is how you get in. Coming to prominence after the Curse Mute, the spell created by Avacyn to assuage the curse of lycanthropy that was ended by her fall and subsequent destruction, the Vilden hunt and thrive in the highlands of Kessig and Stensia. Wolfear. Speaking of Avacyn and the Curse Mute, a pseudo-pack called the Wolfear came into being from those whose affliction was eased by the Archangel. Fusing their split beings into one, these anthropomorphic creatures were dedicated servants of Avacyn, protecting humanity even after the angel was destroyed, though very few of them survived the breaking of her spell. Dire. The Dire Pack was comprised of the nastiest werewolves touched by Emrakul as she descended upon the plain of Innistrad and was subsequently imprisoned within the Silver Moon. They are faster, stronger, larger, and more dangerous than normal werewolves, thus making up the bulk of Tovalar's new pack after the disbanding of the Mondronen. Silverfur. Led by a pair of Wolfear named Johanna and Pavel, the Silverfur pack is the last remaining few of those transformed by the Curse Mute. Though they are small in number, they consider themselves virtuous and helpful, aiding against the likes of Emrakul and Nahiri during the Battle of Thraben. Drone Pack. These werewolves are those touched by Emrakul, their flesh warped and their minds changed by the Keening Mother. One of my favorite planeswalkers happens to be a werewolf. Arlen Cord, who I mentioned in my previous video regarding the Markovs, has a tumultuous history, both with her lycanthropy and those in power on Innistrad. Summoned into the hunt as a teenager, Arlen was wary of indulging in the violence of her wild nature, and often butted heads with pack leader Tovalar, who mentored the young werewolf for a time. Eventually, Arlen's refusal to partake in senseless violence came to a head, and Tovalar fought with her, their battle ending with Arlen escaping from the pack. Keeping her lycanthropy a secret, Arlen found herself as part of the Church of Avacyn, using the Archangel's charms and magic to fend off the transformation. Her dedication paid off, with Arlen eventually being named an Archmage of Gold Knight. Unfortunately, her coronation was beset upon by demons, and her rage could no longer be contained or hidden. Arlen Cord transformed, tearing apart every devil in sight, and, shockingly, even an angel. This act ignited her planeswalker spark, and she found herself ripped away from Innistrad. Arlen has been involved in a great many stories since then, including the War of the Spark, Midnight Hunt, Crimson Vow, and even fighting alongside Soren Markov once again during the multiversal Phyrexian invasion. She considers herself a protector of werewolf kind and hopes that, despite everything, there can be peace on Innistrad. Much like vampires and their legendary families, the werewolves of Innistrad have suffered various onslaughts and have been on fluctuating sides throughout history, depending on pack. However, they do not fuse themselves so readily to the politics of the plane as vampires do, and therefore do not make so many dramatic appearances. Their largest line in Innistrad history involves the Travails and the Eternal Night that followed. In a letter to Vadric, the famed astronomancer, Arlen Cord lamented, "Daylight is losing its battle against an invading night. This autumn in the provinces is crisper than usual, the harvest harsher. The night leaves a skin of frost on the pumpkin fields and on the last clinging leaves of the Kessig woods. No tentacled horrors have been seen since the closing of the travails, and the keening mother slumbers peacefully behind the face of the moon. But I've heard farm folk whisper of a wrongness since that time, a misstep of the ticking hours, a bend in the shape of the darkness. I fear not all was put right after the travails. And on this world, there are always those who will take advantage of darkness. Of course, I hear the howls in the night. At first, Kessigers called it a blessing from Sigarda that, since the travails, those howls always died out, lonely plaints to an uncaring moon. But more and more, the wolf sounds echo and multiply, full and strong and yearning, a chorus of savage throats. In their way, the werewolves are celebrating. They celebrate their hot breaths embracing air, the smell of flesh in their nostrils, the bending of their skeletons timed to the emergence of the moon. They celebrate that the night constricts the day to a few dwindling pale hours, and they celebrate the belief that the night will soon be theirs. As I pen this, I hear my own pack whimpering in the woods behind me. I feel the urgent way they paw at the earth, how their heartbeats quicken as they look back into the darkened Ulvenwald. I know they feel the pull of the howl, for I feel it too. We must seek a way to put things right, and soon. We touched upon these events in my previous video, where a snowballing of events led to a grand conflict of nearly everyone versus the Markov Voldaren clans, as Olivia Voldaren vowed to lord over Innistrad herself. The Eternal Night is not caused by these actions. That is thanks to Emrakul being imprisoned in the Silver Moon hanging over Innistrad, but Olivia, of course, stole one half of the required artifacts to rebalance the sun and moon in the sky, only after Tovalar himself disrupted the initial ritual. Neither of these creatures wanted the sun to return, as they both individually found themselves in greater power in the perpetual darkness. Despite this, Tovalar and his pack did come to Arlen's aid as she fought off Olivia for the Moonsilver Key, and eventually balance was indeed restored. Mechanically, werewolves can be a tough lot to work with. The day and night cycles for each game are dependent on players casting or not casting spells. Previously, this would leave werewolf players at a disadvantage, their most powerful creatures stuck in human form and at the mercy of everyone else at the table. However, one of the best and most viable werewolf creature cards, especially as a commander, changed the game. Tovolar, Dire Overlord, can force nighttime on your turn, effectively overruling any gameplay interactions. This gave players more agency in controlling their board state, and while it didn't massively improve the popularity of the creature type at the table, it did make them more viable. Tovolar is currently the only werewolf in the top 100 of commanders on EDHREC, and he's sitting at number 89. Respectable. Out of curiosity, I kept scouring the top list. He's the only werewolf in the top 200 as well, and 300, and 400. Okay, I stopped at 400. It's fairly definitive that werewolf isn't exactly a favorite, and while EDHREC isn't the end-all be-all of every Magic the Gathering player, it's got a pretty good pulse on the fan base. Older werewolves are even more complicated to work with, as they don't explicitly state the same day-night cycle as the Midnight Hunt cards. But if you were me and I were you, I'd just ask your table if they're cool with rule zeroing werewolves to all work on the same cycle. As someone with a Tovolar deck with Arlen Cord at his side, I'm always the first to ask. Please don't make me do this. There you have it. The werewolves of Innistrad and their cruel fates. It seems that everyone on Innistrad is in for a gloomy life, and those unwilling to exploit humankind tend to be worse for wear. Thank you guys, as always, for joining me here in the study. It really means a lot. If you've liked these videos, please consider subscribing and tossing a like my way. You'd be surprised how much it helps the channel's growth. See you next time. Deep in the House of Lore.